Quiet on the set. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. I'm DearMyrt, your retired friend in genealogy. Welcome to the book launch party for Exploring Norwegian Genealogy. You know that I know one of the co-authors, Liv and her friend Margaret have joined us today. Now, a couple of us were lucky and got to look at this book a little bit early. And one of the gentlemen who did see it was Vidar Øverli. I hope I did okay by that. I especially appreciate his very last sentence, and he published this yesterday on Facebook. It's also very up to date. This is what we need, is a relevant guide to doing research in Norway. I don't live in Norway. I don't know that much about Norwegian genealogy, or if I didn't have the assistance of Liv and now her co-author Margaret. So let's pull Liv and Margaret up. Turn on your mics. Our wonderful tech guy will now spotlight them. Liv, as many of you may know, speaks all over the world using Zoom, but has also attended Roots Tech, participated there. Liv, tell me how you got to know your co-author, Margaret.
Oh, that's some time ago in 2012. I was
Okay.
writing an article about a photographer in Moss where Margaret lived, and she was in my family. And the sources were not always as evident back then as it is now. So I asked her, and she was going to Scotland the next day, but she answered my email and said she'd help me. And
Oh,
we've been
so
friends since.
now you're born in Norway, but Margaret, you're born in Scotland, but live
Yes,
in Norway.
yes. I came to Norway when I was about 21.
You do have a kind of Norwegian accent. That's why I wanted to understand, or why I asked that question. So Liv is explaining that she met you and you helped her find more concrete evidence, I'm assuming in original documents rather than family lore, about ancestors. One question I have for you, and then I'll get back to Liv, and I hope that our host is spotlighting Margaret. Margaret, here in the United States, the federal government has been doing an every 10-year census enumeration, starting in 1790. Were census records just as prolific over there in Norway?
Unfortunately, they weren't. Our earliest one is from 1801, but then there's a big gap until 1865. But from 1865, there are quite a few up to 1920. 1920 is the last one that's been released to the public.
Okay, that release to the public right to privacy thing is something each of us deals with, regardless of the country in which we live. And then there are things like adoptions. Each jurisdiction has its own opinion on things. All right, let's switch over here to Liv again. Liv, you're very adept, as is Margaret, with the English language. Could you tell me just right up, I mean, I'm going to give you a really silly question, but understanding that most of your readers are not Norwegian at this point, having said that Margaret helped you, a Norwegian, with your research in your own country. But for those of us who are not of Norwegian, are not Norwegian residents, what's the number one bit of advice you'd give?
If you want to master the Norwegian language, there are a lot of aid at the internet. First of all, if you have a page and you use Chrome as
the browser, the
your
Chrome
tool,
browser, and it has the option to translate that page. Good point.
Yeah, and there are some others apps on iPhones where you can just hover over a text and it will translate for you. So it's not difficult to have something in Norwegian.
Yes. You know, I want to break with tradition here and pull Randy up. Randy is on the panel. Where are you? Randy, do you want to turn on your mic? Randy, when you went to Norway to do research, I think it was on your wife's side of the family, wasn't it?
Yes, Linda is 1/4 Norwegian. Her folks came from Voss in Hordaland and migrated to Wisconsin, and actually took the Leland farm name, even though none of them had been born on Leland farm near Voss.
Okay, that's intriguing what name they chose. The reason I brought you up on the panel to speak at this point, when you went there a number of years ago, had Chrome even been invented?
It was 1999.
Yes.
And first of all, I used the message board on RootsWeb, I guess it was.
Yeah.
My Norwegian board and a lot of people contributing, and we were going to go and visit our exchange girls in Finland, and so we made a Scandinavian trip out of it. I actually met 4 of the Norwegian Oslo area researchers for dinner one night, and we had a nice talk and a little walk through the city and things like that. And then we took off our bus on the train and were able to see the places that Linda's family grew up in.
I love it. This is
the 1850s, and there was actually a woman who was a distant cousin, the wife of a distant cousin, who showed us around one day and took us out to Leland Farm and took us to some of the other.
I love this, and you used the technology that was available at the time, which were message boards. And Liv mentioned that now there's so much on the web. If you found something that had you'd done a Boolean search for a name, and up comes a page and it's in Norwegian, the Chrome browser and some of those apps will translate the page for you. So you are lucky that there was the technology available then. And back to what our what Vidar said, this book provides information on what's up to date. Absolutely, what's up to date. All right, let me share my screen again and explain one thing to our visitors. Those of you who are watching the recording and those of you who are here today. This is a tiny URL I created that takes you directly to the book at their publisher. Imagine I use the title of the book, upper and lowercase. All right, that's going to be easy to remember, tinyurl.com and then / exploring Norwegian genealogy. Okay, this is, okay, I'm seeing great comments and congratulations in the chat, Liv and Margaret. Let me just take this one little point and we're going to get on to our first word. This is a picture of Liv and Finn Carlson and my husband, Gordon Erickson, who's here today. Liv helped Mr. Myrt go through paperwork, including the bankruptcy of his ancestor who came over about the same time yours did, your wife's did, Randy. He was escaping his bankruptcy court hearings. You just never know. Yeah. All right. Liv, let me also go back one slide because I want to talk a little bit more about the background. Liv, can you tell me more about Margaret's background? And then I will ask Margaret to mention something about your background. Okay, Liv?
Margaret's background?
Yes.
Yes. She is a member of the church and has been helping people for 40 years doing their genealogy.
When you
she's
say
kind
the
of-
church, which church? The Church of Norway? I don't know which church.
Help me, Margaret.
Yeah, it's a big mouthful. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
So you work at a family history center in
yes.
Norway?
Yes.
Got it.
I've been in the family history center for about 20 years.
Bravo.
I started working on my own genealogy about 40 years ago, but it's 20 years roughly since I started in the family history center.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for being a volunteer there. And we do learn great things by helping other people. Obviously, you now know the language pretty darn well, being able to decipher old script and understand what some of the words are. You belong to several genealogy organizations. Could you mention that? And the fact I want to mention that in addition to this book, you've written a number of articles.
Yeah, Margaret is very experienced in making magazines, local magazines in genealogy. So she's an important person in more than one society.
Okay, so you've got, as Randy was using a family search booklet on Norway, he's telling us in the chat, some microfilm of things. Margaret's working with people in the family search centers, as they now call those family history centers, using microfilm, etc. And then you're one that's very understanding of a specific area in Norway. I'm asking that as a question.
Yes, it's in the she's an expert on the area close to Sweden, so she's also expert on Sweden. You have to know Swedish research because a lot of people in her vicinity, they come from Sweden originally.
Well, yeah, there's quite a bit of understanding Norwegian roots extend into just from the geography and the history of Russia, etc. There are time periods when Sweden was part of Norway was part of Sweden, if I understand correctly. Dianna, let's have you turn on your mic for a minute. Don't worry, Liv, we'll get around to some of the things you're doing. But Dianna, you teach Scandinavian research.
Correct.
And
for about 40 years.
Yeah. So like we got another experienced panelist here. I know you reviewed the book and worked with Liv. Liv sent us both PDF copies of the book as it was progressing. Tell me how you view this book in relationship to the classes that you teach when people have Norwegian genealogy research to accomplish.
I was so excited when Liv contacted me and told me she was working on it, because for years I've been looking for a good contemporary resource for Norwegian. I have them for Sweden. I have them for Denmark. But the best I had for Norway was from the 1960s.
Oy.
So that was not real helpful with the internet and everything else that's available. So I was very excited when she started working on this book. And I love the way that it's organized, and would like to talk about that for a minute when it's appropriate.
If we have a chance, yes.
Yeah.
When we look at the book at Leland's website, Family Roots Publishing, actually tiny URL, Exploring Norwegian Genealogy, we'll see the chapter headings there, which will give us a good idea of the arrangement of the book. I do think it's logical and sensible. Your own research is principally United States and Denmark. So that's how you got into the Scandinavian mixture.
Correct, because a lot of people there aren't as many Danes as there are Norwegians and Swedes in the US. So that's what people were looking for. So I just combined all three. And most of my classes have been for a combination.
So now you've got a contemporary, up-to-date
I've already updated my syllabus with it, so I'm ready.
Oh, that's good. All right. Thank you, Dianna.
My next presentation's in April. So yes, I'm very happy about it.
Okay, that's a very good recommendation. All right, Leave. I keep turning to you because I know you better, and so I'm going to ask your partner Margaret to tell me about you and your biography. So Margaret, take it away.
Yes, well, Liv has grown up not far from Oslo, but she also has some family roots in the Oppdal area, and we write quite a bit about the Oppdal area in the book in connection with one of our examples. Liv has worked professionally with marketing, among other places, for one of the main Norwegian banks. But a few years ago, she took early retirement so she could work with her passion, which was for genealogy, and started working professionally.
Yes, and during that time, since her retirement, is when I got to know Liv. She came to Roots Tech. She's been in my home for DearMyrt after parties. She's helped us so much with Mr. Myrt's research. Liv, you are on the board of a genealogy society in Norway. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's the largest society in Norway, called Slekt og Data. It's got 12,000 members, and the name data implies that you use computer technology in researching.
Okay, so so they're very up to date and using the tools available. You know, sometimes I hear people, you know, in the olden days, we tried to pull people onto the internet because there were message boards and typed indexes to things. Now with digital images of church books and court records and newspapers and things, it's easy to convince people to do their research online because it saves time, and then they can spend their research dollars traveling to Norway to look at records like you showed Mr. Myrt about that bankruptcy.
Yes.
That is, that bankruptcy file. I remember how tenderly you approached the subject, saying to me, you and Finn, are you sure Mr. Myrt really wants to know all that's in this file? But of course, we want to know. We do. So, all right, good.
Ethics is a very important part of genealogy. When to tell something and when not to.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky to say the least. I don't know what to think here. Let me pull up another screen so that we can take our first word from the book. I asked you all for some words. And let's see. So what is folk, go for it. Say it to me in Norwegian.
Folketelling.
Mhm.
So if you know some German, folk, people,
Yeah, yeah.
and telling, that's counting. So in a folketelling, you count the people of a country and you count all of them. So the first one we have is from 1801, and
Yes.
we have some previous to that, but then they're manntall, meaning they count the men.
Well, and as Margaret told us, then the most recent one is 1920. And so that's something new for those of us that live, for instance, in the US, where the 1950 was released last year. So we're expecting, because of our blinders, for things to be perfectly similar over in other countries. And this is all determined by your government. And so that right to privacy must be respected. Okay. All right. So let's pull on, and let me change the spotlight there. Let's bring on Mark. Where is Mark? Can you spotlight him, please? Is he there? Raise your hand, Mark. I can't see you in the list here. I don't see him. Okay, we're skipping. Come back to me when we find him. Okay. One reason I wanted to talk with Mark is that he has just been to Norway this past summer, so I hope he is able to join us shortly. Okay. And let me spotlight Laila Christiansen. And the reason I want to bring you on, my dear, know you and love you. In fact, we have the same bookshelves in the background with the doors.
Yeah, Billy.
Yeah, our favorite thing to go to IKEA. I've gotten to know you over the years as well, and I recognize you as a responsible, a pretty darn good researcher who
Okay.
likes to go to Florida when we're not having hurricanes over there.
I know, yeah. I'm going in 2 weeks.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, hurricane season's almost over. And what I want to talk with you about is the importance of that you've found in doing what Margaret was teaching Liv, to get the actual documents that may lead us to understand a family relationship, parent to children, siblings, etc. And are you using any genealogy software to organize your research?
I use the legacy family tree software.
Mm-hmm.
I've used that for many years. I started with Family Tree Maker, actually.
So those are two very popular programs. The point being, there's no need for us to reinvent the wheel. There's Roots
No.
Magic, all sorts of family historian, other programs that can help us organize the results of our research. How are you at downloading the document and keeping a copy for yourself?
Oh yeah, I do that all the time from
Okay.
wherever I find it and
Okay,
analyze it.
now I'm going to ask you, how are you at creating a citation to explain where you found that document? Ooh.
Oh, well, I use actually the source writer in Legacy that's made of Elizabeth Shawn Mills standards. So I'm doing really okay at it. Not too
I think
shabby.
you are doing pretty okay at it. It looks like Mark is arriving. Be sure, Dave, to watch to see that his mic goes live. I applaud you and knew that I could talk to you because it's important when I started out, I was like Leave, where I went along with the family story, and that my grandmother was born on a certain, well, day, month, and year. And then as I was running across documents, it seemed like everything was off by 3 years. And so I had to resolve that, figure out why there was a consistent discrepancy with what she was telling us her birthday was, her birth date. And in those early days, if I found a family mentioned in a book, I'd copy the page of the book and not do as Leave and Margaret are telling us, to be sure to keep track of the source or where I found it. Yeah, so I'm proud of you. Thank you so much for letting me speak with you today.
You're welcome.
And
Thanks.
enjoy your trip from the frozen Northland of Norway to Florida shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. All right, is Mark's mic working? Let's have you unmute, Mark, and let me know.
I have asked him to unmute and no results yet.
Okay.
I'll try again.
Okay, he will unmute himself. I'll pull him up in just a little bit.
Here we go.
Oh,
There we
good.
are.
Excellent. Okay, so welcome. We were hoping to see you today.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to spotlight you for everyone. Leave and Margaret asked me to talk with you about your trip, your recent trip to Norway. How recent are your Norwegian roots? I mean, you're in South Africa right now. Is that because of work or?
No, I'm in the United States.
Oh, you're in the US. I
Yeah.
misunderstood. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, golly. So you're like, maybe like Mr. Myrt, where your Norwegian roots, I see you got ancestor pictures in the background. Cool. Your Norwegian roots came over about what time period? His were in the mid 1800s.
Yeah, 1891, they immigrated to the United States.
Okay. And where did they end up settling, that first group?
Well, the first place they went was Lyons, Minnesota, and they stayed there for a few years and then got land grants in North Dakota, and each got 150 acres. My grandfather,
Okay.
my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my uncle.
And how did you find their records in Norway so that you knew, like Randy did, where to go in Norway to see where they once lived?
Well, first of all, we had some local family folklore that was passed down to me from aunts and uncles. Actually, there was a published book of their history in North Dakota that spoke a lot about Norway and when they had come over and those kinds of things. But then I got onto Ancestry.com and started doing research through Ancestry.com and found some history there until I got stuck, and then I contacted Liv.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that Liv had actually helped you with research.
Yeah.
She's a pretty high profile Norwegian genealogy expert here to those genealogists here in the United States. So when you say that, I know you were in the best of hands there.
Oh, absolutely. We had such fun, especially on this trip in July. Liv took the time to meet us there and introduce us to people that now owned the Sterk family farm. And we just had such a trip. My 3 adult daughters came with us, and Liv was such a blessing to us.
That is so cool. All right. Now, have you seen a copy of the book?
Oh, yes, I have it here in my hands.
Yay. Me too. Me too. Yeah. So your advice then, of course, naturally is going to be get the book if you want to overcome the lack of documentation that might be in family lore, to finding original documents that mention the place and time where your ancestors lived in Norway.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of cool to walk where they once walked.
Oh, it was. It was an amazing trip. It was an amazing experience, one that we'll remember for a very long time. And we made very good friends with the current owners of the Sterk family farm, which was just an amazing experience.
Yeah, I just think that is so cool. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm glad your mic worked and that we got you. Somebody must have texted you because I was looking for you. And thank you
Yes.
for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's let me switch gears a little bit. Can you see Kirkbook on the screen? Yes or no?
No.
No.
All right, I will share my screen. Okay, the green button, Dave, I lost it for a minute. He had trouble with that on Saturday. Okay. All right, so Kirkbook. To me that I know something from my German research. So Margaret and Margaret, talk to me about Kirkbooks.
Oh, you're actually missing an E in the middle, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, it has to have an E right here?
After the K.
Oh, right here, Kirke.
Yeah.
Oh
But,
my gosh, thank you.
But it's interesting because there are a lot of Norwegian words that are also Scottish dialect words, and Kirk is one of them.
Okay.
And we talk about the kirk in Scotland, meaning the church, and kirke is the Norwegian word for church. But in Norway, they started very late. It was in the well into the 1900s before they started with public registration of things like births and marriages and deaths.
Yes.
So the main source we have for vital records in Norway is actually the parish records, or the church books, as we also call them. And so some of them started as early as the middle of the 1600s. And these are our main source until up to about to the 1920s, roughly. This is where we go to find births, marriages, and deaths. But births are usually in christening records or baptismal records. As you also can call them.
Here we think, we'll get a new genealogist, and they're working on 20th century research. And they say, I don't know anything about my grandparents other than their name. And they don't realize the church or public vital records here in the United States weren't required until 1920. Yes, New England, they're very good, especially Connecticut. But when you have a locality where there are not yet government records of birth, marriage, and death, we turn to the parish records. So what you're telling me is this is similar in that a parish record shows the christening of a child, the marriage of a couple, the burial for a deceased individual. So Kirke with the E between the K and the B. All right.
Yes. But the Norwegian parish records are maybe in a special position because the priests or pastors in the Church of Norway, they had a double role because they were also public officials. So the church records are not only ecclesiastical records, they are actually the official records for 200 or 300 years.
That is very different from the separation of church and state that I'm accustomed to here in the United States, where church records stay with the church and public vital records stay with that state government. They might be in the county level, might have been forwarded to the state government, but they're required by the state government. We have no national birth, marriage, and death record repository. So new genealogists facing research for the first time in Norway need to understand there is not that separation of church and state. I became aware of that, Margaret, when Mr. Myrt and I traveled to Trondheim, and then Liv, remind me of the where Finn Karlsson had worked for many years, and he took us on that tour. Where was that?
Dora.
Yes, Dora. Exactly.
It's an old submarine station.
Yeah, the old submarine base from World War II, the German submarine base, which is built like a brick chicken coop, and they couldn't blast it out, so they decided to make it a regional archive. And there we found the court records of the bankruptcy, as well as the Kirk book, which mentioned the christening of Mr. Myrt's great-grandfather. Frank, hi Frank, our guy in Germany. He says for him it's easier to translate it without the I or the E, because he's thinking German. But he's referencing a table in the book Exploring Norwegian Genealogy. The example that you used in your book is the same layout and style as German church books. Interesting. I love it when we can compare and contrast how records were kept and for what reasons in different ecclesiastical as well as governmental organizations. Okay, good. All right, let's just take another word. This is something I'd heard Mr. Myrt talk about. Let's see, maybe we can pull up Liv to talk about this one.
Yes, bygdebøker.
Yeah, I'm gonna add
or
you as,
bygdebok.
yes.
That's
Pretty
also
important.
Yeah, it's very, very important because there are many of them here in Norway. It's also called farm books. So so the books, they describe all the farms in a municipality, the people who live there, and talks of other history in a community. They have changed during the time. At first, they only took the big farms, the rich farmers, but afterwards they would include also the husmen and other groups. And today, sometimes you have the whole community. So it describes all the houses in the municipality. And who lives there.
Who lived there when, yes. Dianna says, I'm very jealous of Norwegian descendants who have the Bildebook, which I don't say perfectly, but you'll go with me on this. Those don't exist for Denmark or Sweden. Yeah. I think aside from census records, my favorite go-to thing is a farm book, because you get that history. You get the context of the neighborhood, the fan club, the friends, associates, and neighbors, as Elizabeth Schoen Mills would have us understand. All right, let's go back and see who else. Yeah. Okay. Please remind me about this next word. Who wants to take this one on? This is those are two words that mean the same thing. Is that why it has a slash mark between them? Liv?
No, it's not. It's fødsel and dåp, birth and christening.
Oh, okay.
Because the minister, he would record the two at the same time. What he really wanted to record was the christening, but he would also give the information of the time of birth of a child.
Okay, so On my birth certificate, well, my baptismal certificate mentions my parents, but it does not mention my birth date. That's I'm a mid-century modern kind of gal of the previous century. So that's a little different. Maybe Dianna, our gal in Florida, but speaking of Denmark, and maybe Frank will mention if in church books that birth date, the actual birth date is mentioned.
Yes, in Danish it is, and Swedish and Norwegian. The church books are all pretty much designed the same way. In fact, some of the ones in Norway are in Danish, but with
Okay.
the baptism is one event, but they mention the date of birth.
Yeah,
Also,
I wish
the parents and the godparents are mentioned in this.
Yes,
in the book.
that's something we'd like to see more of.
Mhm.
So Margaret, jump in here. You had a comment.
Oh yes, I was answering Diana's comment that we don't have these bygdebøker or farm books in Sweden and Denmark, but Sweden has another source that we don't have in Norway. They have something called household censuses, and in the household censuses you can often follow a person for most or even all of his life.
Okay, is it
because
true?
because they were recorded at parish level.
Mhm.
Okay, and is it true that if a person, there was a time when people didn't have last names, you know, Adam and Eve. I can't go that far back, but I digress. Then a very logical thing is to take on the farm name for a surname, or to take on a father's first name, his given name, as your surname, adding a suffix. Could you speak about that, Leave? Derivation of surnames.
Yes. A person had 3 names: a given name, a patronym, and a surname, which is also an address. So the surname would be fetched from where people lived, the farm name. So during his life, my great grandfather, he was born on a farm called Uv, and then he was called Henrik Olsen Uv. And the next thing, he worked as a shoemaker at a farm called Hol, and then he had that name or that address as his last name.
So it's like Joe Smith of Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay, but Americans or English-speaking people take that those 3 words and assume that is the name it's going to be all the time. But if John Smith of Chicago moves to Los Angeles, he's now John Smith of Los Angeles. Translating that to Norway, that's something we have to keep in mind.
Yeah.
What about patronymics, Margaret?
Well, the patronymics, they were derived from the father's name, with adding for a man it was sen or sometimes son at the end. So the son of Hans would be Hansen, and if Hans had a daughter, his daughter's surname would be Hansdatter, literally daughter of Hans. So these were common until towards the end of the 1800s. And by 1923, it was compulsory to have an inheritable surname in Norway instead of a patronymic.
1923?
Yes, there was an act passed in Parliament that said that everybody was to have an inheritable surname.
Okay, I get it. That makes a lot of sense to me. So what we're dealing with is an understanding of how names can change over time because the ancestor moves. And if it's before 1923, there was not the option, or there was not the requirement to keep a surname, to have an inheritable surname. Oh my gosh. So what we need to do is just fast forward a couple hundred years and then it's easier to trace. But that's the great fun of it. Okay, Mark, you have a comment. I'm going to bring you up and have you talk about that surname issue.
Yeah, my great-great-grandfather's name was Hansen in Sweden. But then it was changed at some time to Sterk. And Liv and Margaret think they know why that happened. I'll let them speak to that, but it was a problem for me because I got stuck. I was looking for the Sterk name when I should have been looking for the Hansen name in Sweden. So it caused me to get stuck, and it took Liv and Margaret to unstuck me.
Okay, the unstuckers here, Margaret and Liv. Talk to me a little bit more about this, because this is a major problem for people when doing Norwegian research, this surname or farm name issue. Margaret, do you want to take the lead?
Yeah, well, Mark's Norwegian ancestor originally came from Sweden to Norway.
Oh.
And the father was called Jonas Nilsson Sterk, and the Sterk name was a sort of moniker he got because he was so strong.
Mm-hmm.
So we assumed first that he'd been in the army, because in Sweden it was very common to get an additional name like that when you'd served in the army. You know, some quality you had if you were brave or strong or something like that. You would get you know, just an additional name. But we followed Jonas from one household census to another, and it doesn't appear that he ever was in the army. He worked as a cobbler and moved around in some of the small villages before he moved to Norway with his family.
So those of you who are listening, oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. You know, but the Sterk name, it was because this man was so strong, and I think Liv could tell you more about some of the stories about his strength.
Okay, Liv, take it away.
Yeah, there are a lot of stories about his strength, and he came to Norway in 1840, and I believe that is the right year because of the research. And he came and asked if he could sleep in the barn. And the man who lived there, he said, "No, of course you can come in and sleep in a bed." And the story goes that he was so broad that he couldn't go the normal way into through a door. He had to go sideways.
Oh my, okay.
And yes, there are so many stories about him.
You got the good stories, Mark, not the bankruptcy stories. You got the good stories, and he's been well fed.
Wonderful, yeah.
And it's been great for me because my great-grandfather, I have his old notebooks, and he's written a 2-page story about Mark's ancestor.
Are you kidding? That is a remarkable coincidence. Wow.
So
yeah.
We are going to do much more research about this Jonas Nilsson Sterk. We visited some of the places that he was born and he lived in Sweden. Margaret and I in August. So I hope next time that Mark will come with us, and we can find out even more.
Oh,
yes,
no.
Absolutely.
You get to take an extra trip.
Yeah,
Mr. Myrt and I need to join you one of these times. Oh, I love it when unusual, this is what Frank Z. Jones calls serendipity in the world of genealogy, where out of all the people in Norway, Mark happens to find Leave, whose ancestor wrote 2 pages about his ancestor. I mean, that is an incredible thing. Speaking about naming, let's pull Randy up. He just made a remark. I will try to remove spotlights here and find Randy on the list because he has a story to tell about his ancestor and something about the name. So, okay, Randy, there you are and your mic's on. Oh, is that a picture? Is that a fjord?
That's a picture of Linda and Bjorg. Bjorg is the Leland that we met in Voss. And this is they're on Yelle Farm, to the south of the end of the lake. And Voss is the little town in the background and the mountain ski resort above it. So that was from 1999. They used patronymics up until the 1870s in this particular family. So the last name changed every generation. And then by 1870s or so, a lot of people in Norway and in the US changed their name. They chose a surname. And her line was from Yelle Farm, which is where they are in the picture. Molster and Tungatigan are in the background at the foot of the mountain. And Molster actually has a living history museum, which was extremely interesting to me. Linda didn't care at all. But that's where they left from in the 1850s. So, but they chose Leland as the name, and we went to Leland Farm, and we figured out that, well, her line hadn't lived on Leland Farm. So how did they get the name? And it turns out that one of the aunts had migrated early in the 1840s, I think, to Wisconsin, Dane County, Wisconsin, and had married a man there who had been from Leland Farm. And so he was carrying the Leland name. And so in the 1870s, all of the siblings and descendants of Linda's Leland line adopted Leland as a name, spelled it differently, L-E instead of L-I. But I'm sure this is, fairly typical in.
So somebody's agreeing. I could hear a hum. Was that you, Margaret, or Leave?
Yes, it was probably me, but yeah, that's very typical because a large percentage of the surnames people in Norway we took instead of the patronymic came from a farm name, a farm where they were born or grown up, or maybe even lived at some time.
Okay, so this complicates it because
Yes,
sometimes it can be the John Smith of Chicago, and sometimes Chicago becomes the surname, even though initially it had been used as the farm name, meaning John Smith of Chicago. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's you need a book. And have we got a book for you? Let me pull it up. All right. And we've got another word to bring up. Huntsman. All right, let's do that. Talk to me about this word, ladies, our dear authors.
I can start. Husmann, that's a name for a farmer. Farmer in Norway has many different names, and it describes what kind of work he does, but also the ownership of the farm he owns. So Husmann is he doesn't own his own farm. He has to do work for the landowner.
Oh, so we would call that, I think I would call that a tenant farmer in the south of the United States. And there's several examples of this type of thing where there's a landowner in England, but he has tenant farmers.
It's not
Tell me
always
yes.
possible. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not always possible to translate it into an exact English word, because there are some small changes, differences.
Little subtleties, yeah.
Yes. And that's been the hard part of doing the book, sometimes to find the right words.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate your going to the effort to do this, because it does make it easier for us to even begin to do our research. And we get to understand the basic principles, but I've also heard from some experienced Norwegian researchers like Vidar, who say this is pretty comprehensive. However, we need to be able to contact you, and that's what we're here about. Let's do a thing here and totally switch gears. Let me pull up my Chrome, and we will go to the website mentioned, tiny URL, Exploring Norwegian Genealogy. This is Family Roots Publishing. Leland Meitzler, our good friend, long time known as one of the premier genealogy book publishers, not just for the United States, not just for Germany, now Norway, with a leading research guidance book. And I think it's through December that they're offering 50% discount. Thank you, Leland. I said I would take you here. Let me give you this link in the chat, those of you that are watching or that are attending. Those of you who are watching the recording, just remember it's tiny URL, then / and then the title of the book. All right, here's the link at Family Roots Publishing. Now, this is available in softbound, which is what I get. It's getting hard for me to hold a meaty book if it's hardbound. I already have sticky notes in it. Because there are things that I want to know if Mr. Myrt has looked at. But I promised you I'd take the chapter list and go through it. Okay, here's hardbound PDF, a combination PDF and the softbound. A little bit more general listing, but here's what I wanted us to look at. How to use this book was particularly helpful to me. I love it when authors do that. They explain things. Here we are with chapter 4, Google searches, social media. These two chapters speak to contemporary useful resources that you should employ when doing your research in Norway. And I must say that, I have spoken now with a lot of people from Norway over the years, and you're well versed in not only the Norwegian language, but the English language. When we went to Norway and you took us on tour, we had no trouble speaking with people. I think you've had a better education than the typical American, because you do have English as a very clear, recognizable, understandable second language. Here's the farm books chapter. You do need to understand the background of Norway, including the geography, archives, kind of a timeline of history. That's something that Dr. Shelley, one of my other panelists from years ago, always said, try to, make a timeline of important events for that area where your ancestor lived. And this brings you that basic timeline for Norway. Occupations was intriguing to me because of the language differences. And sometimes we will see that in documents and want to know what that means. And so that part of the book is helpful. What is the brief history of infrastructure? Do you want to mention that, Liv?
Yeah, it's all about train and telephones and things like that, because it's very different to other countries. The trains were not available as early as in other countries, and to understand things, you have to know a little bit about infrastructure.
You do. And using all those fjords and waterways to traverse and share commodities, etc., are things that we need to understand. Frank over there in Germany, he knows that today in the 21st century, it's very easy to get around by train. I didn't know that when I went over in 1995. I just assumed I had to have a car. He's snickering at me, I can see. Anyway, so talk to me just briefly about ethnic minorities. So we are all, I do have Scandinavian ancestry, just not Norwegian, more Danish because of the German-Danish border challenges. I guess I could put it that way. Talk to me about that. Maybe, well, either one. Who wants to take that? Yeah, go
The
for it,
most
Lee.
well known is the Sami people.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's a lot is written about the Kvens, which are, to say it in very general terms, it's Finnish Norwegian population.
Mm-hmm.
So many are looking into their history and trying to find what really happened, and they just find out now that they are Sami or Kven.
Liv, you had an ancestress who was in that upper part of Norway that reaches over and I think even touches Finland. Is that what I'm thinking of? Where is that one of the regions where there was that intermingling? So even understanding the geography is an important item. Outdoor life. All I can think of was one time you came to a webinar and the snow was up to the roof line at your house. Of course, you do kind of live on with a little hill behind you, but anyway, yeah, there is the chapter that's really important for those translation aids that we were mentioning at the top of the hour. Naming traditions we've tackled somewhat in this presentation. And then what to do before you even go to Norway. Wow. Probably the biggest thing, how to find your ancestors' town of origin. And you've used some examples and you've talked about the fact that the FAN method, friends, associates, and neighbors, are probably going to help you, unless your ancestors like Mr. Myrt, who slipped out of town by dark of night to evade his creditors. Yes. He talks about, there's things about the main genealogy websites, other websites, some of which have free access, how to learn more about migration. And then I love this part about the two stories of where you trace two different folks who left Norway to New Zealand. I wouldn't have guessed that, but I've learned about that. And here's something about those census records. The Kirke with the E in the middle book. I'm never going to live that down. Quite a bit on that, the whole part 6. And then about digital archives. A little bit more in that chapter on ethnic minorities. So as you can see, I'm not even all the way down the page. There's quite a bit in this book to help us, as well as actual links. we have a couple of other people that I'd like to acknowledge who are here today. Among your guests, Jill Morelli, who's a fellow bread baker. We took a class together recently. And mention a few other folks here. I see Heidi leave. Do you want to mention them? And I'll just stop screen sharing. You all can. Daniel said he had to leave early. Daniel from our guy from Ireland. Okay, leave. Bente, it's here. Okay, there's Mr. Myrt, Gordon Erickson. Elsie is here. Thank you for being here. Of course, we spoke with Mark. Heidi, you're good to see you. You're a fiction writer, aren't you? So you know how difficult it is to take a thought and get it in the book and get it published.
I know about that.
You know about the heartache of that. And do you have a copy of the book?
No, I don't. I've seen it, just the copy that I have in an email.
I love it.
I haven't seen the real copy yet.
Okay, so you have the PDF. I actually prefer PDF versions of books because they are every word searchable. Whatever your PDF viewer is, you can type in the word you're looking for. Remember, Kirk book has an E in it. Okay. That's how you're going to remember it, believe me. And then it will take you to the hit list and you can follow through and find whatever it is you need in a book. Thank you, Heidi.
Yes.
Chris?
Heidi has done the illustrations for our book.
Okay, tell me more.
I've studied art and history in the US and have dabbled with the art all my life. And Margaret was just really sweet and asked me if I wanted to help illustrate this book. And she wanted me to
in addition,
yeah.
Yes. In addition to documents, folks, samples of documents, there's some very good illustrations to make this readable, to make this book inviting. Aside from the fact that it's chock full of very practical information, Heidi's work has softened the edges. And I think art does that for us and makes this work doable. Chris, let me meet you here. I want to be sure to say hello to everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chris works at the National Library.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris. Okay. So tell me about what you do at the National Library of Norway.
Well, I'm an historian. I mainly work with local history and genealogy, because those things are really tightly connected in Norway.
Totally.
Mainly to the farm books, that's a big thing in both local history and genealogy. So I guess Liv and I met through that at some point. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's that's a thing that genealogists learn very quickly. Climbing our family trees isn't just the document, it's understanding the area at the time and why that document was created, what pressures there were politically and culturally, etc. There may be pejorative remarks in a bankruptcy file about one's ancestor, but to understand the history of a specific town, of a region, of a country. I mean, I remember Liv's story about her ancestor up there in that northern little neck, I call it, of Norway, and the relationship with the Finnish people, and understanding what happened with Denmark and Norway and Russia and Sweden. Big impact. So what are those things on your wall?
Some African masks.
Okay, I was going
Ghana
to
and
say,
Zimbabwe.
yeah, that's out of context. That's Africa.
Very out
Today
of
it's
context.
Norway. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, Frank is here, our guy in Norway. I think we pretty much seen everybody. Elsie, I did not have you turn on your mic, and I would like to meet you and spotlight you for everyone as well. How do you know Liv and Margaret? If you could turn on your mic, dear. It's okay. There you are. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm not speaking English so good, so
It's
I
okay.
think I met Liv in Slekt og Data.
Okay. So Liv, how do you know Elsie?
Yeah, it's like she says. She's the one in charge of the genealogy day in Oslo, so she has had a busy weekend. We meet at
that was just this weekend, right?
Yes, we meet at the Riksarkivet, which is the main archive, and there are lectures and people show their books or whatever they have brought. And Elsa is the one who has worked with that for months before it happens. So
Thank
she's a very valuable person for us all.
Very good to meet you. Thank you, Elsie. Is there anyone else? Oh, Leland, I'm going to just spotlight you for everyone. You are a very happy publisher because the book is flying off the shelves. I wanted to give Mr. Myrt a Christmas present of a hardback copy, and it was sold out already. So congratulations, you picked a good pair of authors to teach people about Norway. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah.
I'm coming to you from our motorhome, which is across the yard, and this is my office away from the office.
Okay.
And,
all right.
It works pretty well.
Oh, good. I was wondering. You have a fire extinguisher right there.
Yeah, you can see it's a motorhome if you kind of look around behind me.
All right.
Now, that motorhome door and the fire extinguisher kind of give it away.
I kind of get it. I do. Okay. Anything else we need to spotlight? Anyone else? Anything I forgot to do?
Yes, please. Erik. Erik is
half Erik.
Scottish, and he can tell us a little bit about how he has helped friends doing genealogy from South Africa.
Oh, he's our South African fellow. Okay, Erik, welcome.
Yes, hello everybody. I was actually born in Scotland, in St. Andrews, during the war, and the story is that well, it's quite interesting actually, because there was a family living in Arendal, which is in the southern part of Norway, and they emigrated to the northeast of England, to Hartlepool in about 1880.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the shipping business. All the people living down there were in the shipping. So he started as a ship's chandler, and his name was Nils Olsen, married to Petra Olsen. They moved to Bo'ness in Scotland after a few years, and they carried on the business there. And of course, they were quite grown up when they moved, and they had 7 children born in Norway, and 2, including my grandmother, was born then in Hartlepool. So the story is that during the war, my father escaped the Germans, came over to Scotland on a shipping boat, on a fishing boat, I mean, and was enrolled in the Norwegian army in Scotland. So he met my mother, who then was, I would say, half Norwegian, because her mother was the daughter of this Norwegian couple.
So how do
And
you?
after the war, they took me. I was 2 years old, and we moved back to Norway. So my Scottish mother lived here, more or less all her grown-up life. And
So
that
what's the
means that
South African connection?
that's another one, but it means that I've got a lot of family in the UK, especially in Scotland. So I keep in touch with them. South Africa is a different story because when I was a qualified civil engineer, I decided to see a little bit about the world. So
okay.
I went to South Africa, and there, of course, I met some people, one of who had Norwegian ancestors. So there's a long story there, and I was thinking when Liv asked me about this book, and I thought, who do I know anyway who would be interested in this book, English speaking? And of course, my Scottish family in Scotland, and of course, some friends that I've got in South Africa who have Norwegian relatives.
Yeah.
So there are 2 books then. There must be 1 book going to South Africa and at least 1 book going to Scotland.
I love it. That's the thing. Thankfully, we have this book in English so that your family members in South Africa, your friends in South Africa can relate. And this is a great introduction to Margaret and Liv, who can help as they have to extend an understanding of, for instance, given names versus farm names versus inherited surnames, etc. Wow. Very, very good to have you here. Okay, anybody else Liv? Guide me here a little bit. I think we're doing pretty well.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so.
I think we got everybody. Okay, so what we've got, folks, is a perfectly wonderful book on how to do family history research in. Okay, we need to mute someone. There we go.
Yeah.
And in the creation of this book, I want to applaud you 2 ladies and congratulate you. This is a big endeavor. You're also putting yourself out there. You already have been for 20 plus years, Margaret and Liv, but now you've got your work in print, and I think the hardest part has been translating, as you say, from Norwegian to English. I'll bet you there will be a big call for a Norwegian version of this book at some point. So rest up, eat your Wheaties, which is the breakfast of champions here in the United States. That's a phrase that we say, eat your Wheaties, and brace yourself, because I'm quite sure something like that should come to pass. This helps, I think Laila will agree, this helps people who have Norwegian ancestry themselves. Chris knows this, Elsie knows this, that we needed a book like this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Cousin Dave, get ready. There's really nothing left to say, but thank you, ladies. I'm DearMyrt, your friend in genealogy. Happy family tree climbing, everybody. That's a wrap.